please join us in the auditorium for this morning's sessions. Thank you. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please silence all electronic devices. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program will begin now.
Good morning, everyone. Over the past 2 days, we have engaged in remarkable and critical conversations about some of the biggest defense and security issues of our time. And I'd like to, once again, to take the opportunity to thank Peter and his entire team for giving us an incredible opportunity to engage in this forum and giving us the space and the freedom to have the type of conversations that I think advance global security and peace. And today, I have the exceptional honor of introducing the HFS Peace with Women's Fellows to this forum. They are a cohort of 13 exceptional military leaders from 10 NATO nations and partner nations, including for the very first time from Ukraine. This annual program, which is now in its 7th year, I haven't caught up in my morning yet, includes more than 40 events where fellows participate in conversations with leaders across the international security sector that shapes the future of democracy and global security. And throughout this program and in each of your commands, you've demonstrated the very best that our countries have to offer. You've shown immense skill and dedication to creating change and building a safer and more peaceful and more secure world. And I truly appreciate the chance that I've had with you all to meet as part of this program in both your time in Toronto and in Ottawa. Our militaries are more effective when women are meaningfully involved at all stages of planning and in carrying out missions. As Secretary Austin just recently has said, women in the military make us better. They make us stronger. We need your voices and your perspectives at all levels of our institutions to take on the biggest challenges of our time. And today, I and all of us would like to recognize you and the work that you've done through this program over the past 3 weeks. And I want to say thanks. Thanks for your dedication to building a better and safer world. And now, I have the privilege and honor of introducing Colonel Angela Thomas of the Royal Canadian Air Force to speak on behalf of the fellowship. Angela is a CP-140 tech. She's a Canadian warrior who hunts submarines. Angela.
Good morning. Thank you, Minister Blair, for the warm introduction, something I never thought I'd get to say. Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellows, past and present. It is my absolute honor to speak with you today on behalf of the 2024 Peace with Women Fellowship and to introduce you to this amazing group. Ladies. Each and every member of our team has had an extensive and distinguished career. Together, we bring over 310 years of service in our respective fields. We're not only accomplished professionals, but we're also multilingual and highly educated, speaking 9 languages and having 34 advanced degrees. These trailblazers, of often the first and only women in the room, have embarked on a 4-week journey of study, inquiry, and enlightenment. Together, we have flown nearly 10,000 kilometers, bridging continents and cultures to engage in a collaborative study of security trends across a broad spectrum of global issues. Our combined experiences and expertise allow us to approach challenges from multiple perspectives, with a focus on finding innovative solutions to the most pressing security concerns of our time. Our combined dedication, intellect, and passion for global security are a testament to the power of cross-cultural collaboration and the importance of a diverse, multifaceted approach to tackling global challenges. Together, we represent the present and the future of international cooperation, and armed with unparalleled curiosity and now a new wealth of knowledge, we have a commitment to shaping a better world for all. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Halifax, under the leadership of Peter Van Praag, and specifically to our fellowship under the care and guidance, a lot of care and guidance from Michaela Tucker and Kimberly Whitehead. For creating and supporting this transformative program, but also for having the foresight to recognize the power of fellowship among senior military women. Your vision has provided us with an invaluable opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect. We also express our deep gratitude to our respective governments and militaries for their unwavering support and commitment. This has enabled us to participate in this incredible journey. And without your endorsement, this program and our experience would not be possible. In addition, a special thank you goes out to all the government, military, industry organizations, community members, and leaders who took the time from their very busy schedule to meet with us, and not only meet, but share candid insights on some of the most pressing global issues. Your willingness to engage with us and to share your expertise has broadened our perspectives in ways that we have never anticipated. Our minds have been opened, and we are forever changed and motivated by what we have learned. The experiences and connections made through this program will undoubtedly continue to shape our work and influence the way we approach the challenges that lay ahead. This cohort may consist of 13 women from 10 different countries around the globe, but through our shared experiences, we have discovered that our core values are universal. We were very fortunate to begin our journey in the Indo-Pacific, where we learned the Hawaiian concept of kuleana. This is a word that means both privilege and responsibility. We feel deeply privileged to have had the chance to participate in this extraordinary experience. However, we are also keenly aware of the responsibility that comes with it. We are committed to taking the knowledge that we have gained and not only sharing our insights with this forum, but applying it in our daily work in the hope of driving collective global change. From our perspective, the issues we face are not women's issues. They are broader global human security challenges that impact all of us. As we reflect on the world today, I invite this group to consider a powerful quote that was shared to us by a very inspiring leader throughout our journey. And the quote is, "Nothing about us without us." So, nothing about us without us. Threats to global security are escalating daily. As we speak, actions are being taken in regions like Ukraine, the Middle East, the Indo-Pacific, and the Arctic. These geopolitical challenges are interconnected and cannot be viewed in isolation. This issue goes far beyond the traditional narrative of democracies versus autocracies. It's not simply about the type of governance that is in a given country, but about fostering global collaboration towards a shared objective. Achieving this requires the use of national power in ways that fully consider cultural and societal perspectives. For this to succeed, world leaders must not only acknowledge that women and greater diversity belong in combat, and more importantly, that diversity must be integrated into national strategies, policies, and diplomacy if we are to achieve our collective goals. When we fail to include the voices of those most affected by decisions or overlook a significant portion of the population, we undermine our strategic advantage. This challenge is especially pressing as our nations face recruitment and retention difficulties within our military forces. And this is at a time when critical skills are needed to address emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and the vulnerabilities created by disinformation. But current statistics show alarming trends. The allure of democracy is fading. The population is aging. There is a divergence in political views between young men and young women. Isolationism is on the rise as both citizens and countries begin to look inward instead of outward and focus on the near term instead of planning for the future. We cannot become fixed on the macro problem without looking at the human impact. We cannot make decisions about regions without including the people in those regions, such as the islanders in the Indo-Pacific and the indigenous peoples in the Arctic. These issues need to be viewed from a kaleidoscope in order to understand the impact at all levels and across all time horizons within our own militaries, governments, populations, alliances, and on the global stage. To accomplish this, we must be willing to step outside our comfort zone and embrace discomfort, recognizing that it is essential for finding the right balance between calling people out and pulling people in. It is through this delicate balance that we can foster understanding and collaboration. However, true and lasting progress will only come when we focus on taking the time to connect, engage, and understand each other on a personal level. Only then can we create the foundation for real change. And the only way we will get true momentum forward and to begin to address our security concerns is by seeing each other as we are, one human interaction at a time. Nothing about us without us. Thank you. Thank you all.
Good morning. Welcome back. My name is Josh Rogan. I'm a columnist with the Washington Post. It's my distinct honor to be moderating this panel at this, my 13th Halifax International Security Forum. Thank you, Minister Blair. Thank you, Peter. Thanks to the staff for putting together this weekend. I can only speak for myself. It's been cathartic. It's been intellectually stimulating. We've had good conversations, good food. The weather, well, you can't have everything. Before we start, I just wanted to pay a very quick tribute to the man who's responsible for me being here 13 times, and many of you, I'm sure, the late Senator John McCain. And yeah, absolutely. So as many of you know, Senator McCain would often do an impromptu comedy routine at the lobster dinner. I'm not going to tell those jokes again right now. Okay, I'll tell a couple of them. He would often say, after my presidential election, I slept like a baby, sleep for 2 hours, wake up and cry, sleep for 2 hours and wake up and cry. What's the difference between a lawyer and a catfish? One's a scum-sucking bottom dweller, and the other one's a fish. He had one joke about Canada. It's kind of about Canada. He said, I had to write this down. He said, geographically, the United States is closest to Canada, geographically, closest to the UK politically, and culturally closest to the Kardashians. That's what he said. But in true John McCain style, he said something. His most famous quote about Russia is more prescient today than ever before. It's the topic of this panel. He would often say, Russia is, quote, a gas station masquerading as a country. That's what he would say. Unfortunately, as we've seen with the war in Ukraine, this gas station has now weaponized its resources in ways that have global repercussions. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, Vladimir Putin has systematically targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure, power plants, substations, transmission lines, in a deliberate effort to freeze and starve innocent civilians. These attacks are designed to punish, demoralize, and destabilize. A calculated attempt to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people. This winter, millions of families face freezing temperatures and darkness, not as an unintended consequence of war, but as an intended, deliberate act of cruelty. Yet in the midst of this destruction lies an extraordinary opportunity. Ukraine's grid, once heavily dependent on Soviet technology, now has the chance to become something unprecedented, a modern, resilient, and decentralized energy system built for the challenges of the 21st century. The war has forced Ukraine to think differently about energy security. Europe, too, has faced a reckoning. For decades, countries across the continent relied on energy imports from authoritarian regimes, betting that trade would ensure stability. But as we've seen, dependence on adversarial nations can quickly become a liability. Energy is not just an economic asset, it's a geopolitical weapon. The need to come up with strategies to defeat this weapon has never been more urgent. Today's discussion is not just about rebuilding what was destroyed, it's about building something better. How can we create microgrids, smart energy systems, and infrastructure that's sustainable and resilient to attacks? How can public-private partnerships help finance and implement this transformation? We're very fortunate to have three outstanding panelists who are leaders in precisely these areas. First, we have Mr. Tobias Lindner, Minister of State at Germany's Federal Foreign Office. Germany has been the forefront of Europe's efforts to support Ukraine, not just with aid, but also in leadership in pursuing a more independent energy future. Next, we have Ms. Nancy Southern, Chair and CEO of ATCO and Canadian Utilities, trailblazer in energy infrastructure and innovation. And last but not least, we have Mr. Laurent Resekis, Executive Director at S&P Global in the United Kingdom. He will help us unpack the financial, technological, and geopolitical forces driving the reconstruction of Ukraine's energy sector. Minister, let me start with you. Can you help us frame this discussion by giving us an accurate snapshot of where we are heading into this winter in the effort to build resilience for Ukraine to get through the next few months, but also to build for the next few years or even decades? Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here, and I believe when you ask where are we, for sure we are at the beginning of the winter. We see that Russia is getting more and more brutal. They have saved over the summer things like cruise missiles with the clear attempt to attack the energy grid this winter. Their aim is to make the Ukrainians freeze in the cold, to make them flee, to make them need to leave their homes to other European countries. So I believe, and speaking about the energy supply in Ukraine, we have to distinguish on the short term and the long run. On the short term, we need the Ukrainians to survive and to sustain in this hardest winter. And it means both military support as well as humanitarian assistance. On the military side, air defense is really key. You know that Germany, together with others, has set up this international alliance for air defense. We are providing further air defense systems, both in that alliance as well as on a bilateral basis, while at the same time, we are providing humanitarian assistance, so the ordinary things that you need when the winter is coming, and energy assistance. We have increased our spending for the energy system since the Ukraine Recovery Conference this summer by 350 million euro. This goes mainly into the grid. It goes into a more reliable, more resilient system. And then later on, and we might talk about this later here in the panel, on the long run, we have to modernize the energy supply, both with connectivity to the grids of other European countries, as well as with the transition to more renewables, to a more decentralized system.
Thank you. Excellent. Nancy, that leads perfectly to my first question to you, which is, when you look ahead at what would be the correct mix of infrastructure, resources, investment, what does that look like? How much is fossil fuels? How much is renewable? How much is experimental? And in that framework, what are the capabilities of the countries that are represented by officials in this room to contribute to that? Help our audience understand where they can go back to their capitals and say, here's what we can do to advance that goal.
Thanks very much, Josh. May I first of all say thank you to Minister Blair, and thank you to Peter and the entire Halifax International Security Forum Board of Directors and your staff. It's been the best conference that I've attended, not as many as Josh, but I hope to overtake him someday.
Well, I'm going to keep coming, so it's going to be tough.
That's a really important question, and it's a complex answer. As Tobias said, there is an urgent need in the short term to get the Ukraine through the winter. And that's probably mostly diesel generators supplied by all of our nations, all of the NATO allies around the world. The longer term, I think we will all learn from weaponizing energy systems. And I believe that it's strikingly apparent that our traditional way of building large grids, the backbone, centralized baseload power plants, is actually a vulnerability for us, where we thought from an economic perspective, this was the most reliable, economic, efficient way to deliver electricity to businesses and homes. Today, we realize that this approach has actually, the weaponized approach, has actually taken away from much of the spirit, seeing those children over the Christmas season, not having a light to be able to read their homework or do their homework by, not having fuel and electricity to be able to cook and heat their homes. This is going to require a completely new design in my mind. It will be distributed generation. We will use advanced technologies for regulating how efficient the electricity is used throughout the country, and hopefully in other countries to adopt these new designs. But there will be a multiple, in my opinion, there will be a multiple complex of different types of technologies used for power generation. There will still be a need for some gas, and those will probably be modular cogen units that provide heat as well as steam as well as electricity. But there will be renewables, there will be battery storage, there will be pumped hydro storage using open pit mines to actually use gravitation to bring out electricity when you've got a shortfall. Thorium is something that's very present in the Ukraine. And thorium is actually a safer mineral to use than uranium. We haven't quite figured out how to get the fission efficient using thorium, but I think the advanced technologies and the excitement of using AI in the future will get us quicker to some of these major solutions at scale. So, and then we'll have to harden the grids, putting the wires underground so that the connectivity isn't as vulnerable from the air. And a number of different designs that we'll be using. I just want to touch on one thing, Josh. Sorry for taking your time, Lawrence. There's a supply shortage around the world for key infrastructure components. Siemens, for example, is just building a new factory in the United States, but it's a 4-year wait for a transformer. Every jurisdiction in the world has been moving towards energy transition, and we have a huge supply shortage. And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to think about where are we going to get the materials and the supplies for Ukraine. They will be easily accessible from China, easily accessible from Russia, but is that where we want the Ukraine to be building its grid from those materials again?
Interesting. Well, that leads us perfectly to your area of expertise, Laurent, which is how do we pay for this? How do we source it? How do the Ukrainians pay for it? And if I may just add a note to that question, what does it say about this war that when Russia wants to ramp up its production, they can ramp it up, but we're 3 years in and we're still facing supply shortages of critical materials and unclear path for long-term financing of critical infrastructure.
Thank you. That's a great point you made, Nancy, about the problems with not enough transformers as the world electrifies. Ukraine, I just want to say one thing about, you see the blackouts and you see the struggles, given the destruction that has been wreaked on its thermal generation in Ukraine, the transmission grids, the distribution grids, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, which was a crime against the planet, in addition against humanity. To have it working as well as it is kind of a miracle. Power grids are not simple. They're unbelievably complicated to manage. And then this war with the people, understaffed, private sector and state working together. I mean, what they've done, is for me, unbelievable. My parents in Michigan, every winter there's a storm, some power line goes down, they don't have power for 3 days. So it's remarkable what they've achieved in Ukraine. In terms of investment, I think an all of the above approach is definitely needed. I think you're going to, so obviously we're talking about, there's a period now where there's an active conflict. Hopefully in the future, there won't be an active conflict, but we have to start now. And there's a lot of efforts at the recovery conferences and all of this to try to stimulate investment, and they're too slow. One of the things that an obvious way for me to allow private sector companies to invest is to cover the political risk. For most companies, the political risk of working in Ukraine today, they're responsible to their shareholders. The risk they perceive, I think correctly, is too high. But there's ways to manage that. And everyone knows that, everyone's discussing that, and it's been achieved on a sort of one-off basis in certain cases. So there's a Danish partnership with Ukrainian company DTEC, which got backing from the Danish Export Credit Agency that covered that political risk, allowed the Danish company to come in to invest. So they're building some new wind in Ukraine. But that's the example I can give. You need a lot more of that. And I think it's achievable. And it just requires, and this is something that doesn't require so much money as it does the intense focus of all of the supporters of Ukraine to put political risk coverage into place so that things can start now and not wait for a perfect situation on the ground, which could still be some time away.
Excellent, thank you. Tobias, let me go back to you, because I think when we're talking about how to support Ukraine, especially in the financial realm, Ukrainians have some ideas about that, as we heard yesterday. They think we should take the seized Russian assets and use that to support the reconstruction of Ukraine now. But most of the governments who are represented in this room don't agree with that. And I'm wondering, how does Germany see that tension, the need to invest more, and at the time when Western countries' budgets are going down and the strains domestically are going down? And if you could also talk about Germany's transformation from a country that was largely dependent, or at least somewhat dependent on Russian energy, to where you are now.
So first of all, on the financial issue, we clearly see the need, and that's why we are the second largest supporter of Ukraine after the United States, both militarily as well as financially, because both goes one hand in hand on, as I already said, you need to do air defense, military support, and at the same time strengthening the energy supply. And we clearly understand that after the Ukrainian victory, there needs to be a mechanism of accountability, both for the war crimes as well as financially for the whole damage of the country and the need to reconstruct and renew the country and to make it fit for being an EU member in the end of the day. That's crystal clear. As you already said, it needs to go hand in hand together with the business community, and I believe partnerships between companies like from Germany with Ukrainian companies are the best way. On our own energy transition, we have learned a hard lesson. You know, for me, it's very easy as a politician of the Green Party that was always opposed against Nord Stream 2, and history has proven that we have been right. It's easy to say that, but the country was naive and believed, the Russians were reliable suppliers on fossil fuels over the whole Cold War. You know this story. And we have seen that Russia is using energy as a weapon, both on the supply side to European countries as well as in Ukraine. And therefore, we fully decoupled from Russian fossil fuels quickly. That was tough. It's still tough on energy prices. It is a challenge. It would be a lie to say you can't do this without a challenge for the whole economy. But we succeeded. And we believe it's not going back to the past. We need to go to the future, also to renew our own energy supply. You know, we have our German model where we decided to phase out of coal, and we have ended nuclear power. I'm not here to teach and preach, so if countries still believe in a different approach, I respect that. At the same time, we need to keep in mind climate action, caring about renewables. That's not something for the better days. It's security policy at heart, because it makes you more resilient, it's more decentralized, and in that case, it makes you less vulnerable also against military threats.
Thank you. Let me stay with you just for 1 second, since you brought up Nord Stream 2. It seems as if there's been a 3-year-long international effort to sanction the Russian energy sector. And 3 years in, it doesn't seem to be working as designed, at least. And we heard this from our Ukrainian friends yesterday, too. They want more sanctions, tougher sanctions, more enforcement of sanctions. But if we're being honest, the sanctions busting is pretty universal. Europeans, companies, American companies, Chinese companies, you name it. Mm-hmm. You know, the sanctions regime could be said to be breaking down. In that environment, what can Germany do? What can the United States and other allies do? Was it always just going to be this way, that the Russian energy sector was going to adapt to the sanctions, or is it too late?
You know, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is you cannot snap your finger and you have the totally efficient sanctions regime from day one on, because there will always be attempts to circumvent it, to find ways to go around it. This Russian shadow fleet, for example, speaking about oil. So there is a necessity in adapting, in amending your sanctions, and having maintenance and compliance packages. I can fully understand that our Ukrainian friends are annoyed by this and that it's always not fast enough. I can fully understand it. But at the same time, and that's the good news, speaking about the European Union, and you know it always requires unanimity, and we have challenges inside the European Union, that's no secret. We have countries inside Europe who are still dependent on Russian fossil fuels. The good news is it goes on, and the next sanctions package is coming. Whoever believed that the European Union might get stuck in sanction package number 9 or something We are now, I think, at number 15, and we are going to number 16. And the only message we have to Mr. Putin is the sanctions will go on, full stop.
Thank you, Lauren.
I mean, the problem, of course, is sanctioning Russian crude oil exports, which is where most of the money is coming from, is going to lead to much higher crude oil prices, and governments around the world don't want that. Now, Ukraine has an amazing opportunity at the end of December to take a step which, in effect, reduces significantly the revenue going to the Russian state. The long-term agreement signed in 2019 for gas transit through Ukraine from Russia expires at the end of December, and that's that. So the gas can stop flowing. That's at current prices, that's $650 million a month less going to Gazprom. And Europe, from the perspective of big countries like Germany, in terms of the Brussels institutions, they are not pressuring Ukraine, as they did in 2019, to continue transit of gas. However, we are seeing all sorts of reports since about May of some deals to continue some gas flowing through Ukraine. Whose gas is it? Sometimes a bit questionable. We've been hearing about this since May, and it's not Europe pushing Ukraine to do this. It's maybe Slovakia, it's maybe Hungary, and I don't understand. If that happens, no matter what the structure is, that is going to be money flowing to Russia to a certain extent, and to continue for Ukraine to earn 10 or 15% of that revenue in transit fees, to me, doesn't seem worth it when Ukraine can, in effect, stop this one source of revenue.
I understand that point, and I want to go to Nancy in a second, but it seems to me that you can change the flow of the energy, but eventually it still gets to where it's going to go. And, just for one example, we see that Indian purchases of Russian fossil fuels spiked tremendously. Then they refine it, and it finds its way back to Europe anyway. So we've got a global market where when you push down on one outlet, it just comes out the other outlet.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I wanted to ask you about the sanctions that we saw this week, which were sanctions on the Gazprom bank.
Yeah.
Is that significant? What should we think about that? Is that going to do any good?
By the way, your point is completely right if you're talking about oil products, LNG, pipeline gas. If Russia stops being able to sell that gas, there's nowhere else for that gas to go. It stays in the ground in West Siberia.
Got it.
The Gazprom bank sanctions, so the U.S. government announced a new round of sanctions against a whole bunch of Russian banks. Now, Gazprom Bank in the gas supply to Europe has a unique position because Vladimir Putin, as sort of a way of cutting off some European companies but not others in 2022, there's a decree saying anyone who wants to buy our gas has to set up these 2 accounts at Gazprom Bank, blah, 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 blah. So all of this continuing buyers of Russian pipeline gas in Europe are using and are required by Russian law to use Gazprom Bank. So starting December 20th, unless something changes, Gazprom Bank will be sanctionable if you're using it for transactions. So either the gas stops on December 20th, and that's not just gas flowing through Ukraine, it's gas flowing up through Turk Stream to Hungary and Serbia, or something happens. Traditionally, the US, with sanctions, has not tried to interfere in sort of gas supply. The US has never tried to sanction Gazprom delivering gas to Europe, et cetera. So I wonder if there may not be some waivers coming, possibly. In any case, we all, I think, expect and hope that gas supply through Ukraine is going to stop anyway on December 31st. So, but it's an open question. It's created a lot of uncertainty. I don't think the sanctions were done to target energy. Gazprom Bank is one of the biggest Russian banks that still was able to operate in certain ways. So I think that drove it, and energy maybe is a side effect.
Interesting. Thank you. Nancy?
Well, I think the discussion on the crinks yesterday was a really important discussion when you consider, if you take in energy into account. There is absolutely no doubt there's discounted oil. There could be easily pipelines built for gas. But on the oil side, India has the largest refinery in the world. They've got a discount on the oil price. Their production is increasing. China has access to that oil. North Korea has access to that oil. And then if they become, where we used to think the Middle East was the superpower for the fossil fuels and energy, the crinks are the superpower on the energy front right now. So I thought there was an earlier discussion yesterday or the day before about increasing our own energy security and self-supply. You touched on a model in terms of financing and how we can actually help Ukraine get the materials required to rebuild the grid and the power sector in particular. I think number one, Tobias, I believe you would agree, as Ukraine begins to recover after victory, you want reliable, affordable, safe delivery. You don't want Ukraine to be a guinea pig for a lot of new products and ways of producing power to build the economic prosperity back up. So you want to make sure that you do this in a very pragmatic and sensible way. And there are models, and I will give you an example. FEMA, for example, in the United States, awarded our company as well as a US partner, Quanta, the contract. It's a 15-year contract. It's about $18 billion right now to rebuild the entire grid in Puerto Rico on the island. It's redesigning the grid so that it is hardened, so that the hurricanes aren't hitting and taking down the entire power system year after year after year. There is a bit of a problem because there is a hurricane every year. And so you're catching up on the hurricane damage while trying to build the new design. But that P3 is, I think, a pretty good model for we won't own the assets after they're built. We're constructing, doing the engineering, the design, and the operations of them. At the end of 15 years, FEMA is providing the funding. The Republic of Puerto Rico owns the assets at the end. And I think that might be a model that is useful in the future. It's the first time we've seen an entire grid being rebuilt on that financial model.
Thank you. I thought it was interesting that you said after the war is won. What part can be done now, before the war is won, and what are the challenges of rebuilding energy infrastructure in the middle of a war zone?
All of our countries are reaching out to countries, and I'm speaking from my specific knowledge in Canada with the humanitarian aid. Excuse me. I think it's this chair. The Admiral was sitting in this chair.
We're all not used to talking this much in 3 days, so yeah.
Asking for whatever extra supplies that we have. The problem is, in the humanitarian aid plea from our countries, the problem is there is such a shortage because we've all been experiencing hurricanes, wildfires, and so there's a lot of rebuilding going on as well as what we talked about in the energy transition. So there's not a lot of excess supply for modular generators to be able to be brought onto site. I think one area that I think we could do a much better job of, and Germany is really quite a leader in this, are the biodigesters, taking waste and producing energy from the methane out of the waste. And I think those can be quickly spotted in distributed areas using a lot of the agricultural waste, but also the city waste. And that may be a quick fix over a winter period and into where we get to the modernization of the grid again.
If I may add one quick thing, because we need to be honest. You know, for this winter, and the Ukrainian energy grid is mainly constructed out of Soviet components. It's important to get spare parts. So the money alone will not help you. And I'm really grateful for our Eastern European allies who have spare parts of those old ancient systems who are giving them to Ukraine in the end. Because you need, on the short run, you need to have spare parts, you need to repair the system, then you need to have pragmatic solutions like generators and all those things.
Yep.
And you need to, wherever you can protect the grid, be it air defense, be it passive protection, all those things. That's important for the winter now.
But you're right, it's all Russian technology in the power system in the Ukraine right now. And so you have to match those parts in the meantime.
Interesting. Let me move to an issue that I think we need to talk about, which is the fact that U.S. policy towards Ukraine is about to change. We don't know how, but we're going to have a new president who has a distinct view on America's role in Ukraine. We don't know what the decision is going to be. We don't know when it's going to be. But U.S. policy is about to change in a major way. And I think if we're having an honest discussion about Ukraine, we need to not overreact to the Trump phenomenon, but at the same time, we shouldn't underreact. And I would like to start with you, Minister. How is Germany thinking about the fact that there is a non-zero chance, maybe even a probability, that broad support for Ukraine, at least in the non-military form, the economic and development and humanitarian assistance, could go away soon, completely? It's a fact. Hopefully not, but we can't ignore that possibility. How is Germany, how is the EU preparing for that? How does that factor into all of these grand plans? Can all of this be accomplished and sustained if the United States government decides that it's no longer in the business of helping Ukraine?
First of all, I have to say I'm a humble state minister and no magician who is able to predict the future, and therefore I will not go into something you would call self-fulfilling prophecy or something. I believe it's important to make clear to the new administration in Washington that, first of all, military and civilian financial support goes hand in hand. It's not one against the other. And also our financial contributions, our reconstruction aid, humanitarian assistance, they are to strengthen the resilience and therefore the ability to Ukraine to achieve victory. It's not only about the military support. Second, we are supporting Ukraine for sure for reasons of solidarity and to stand on the right side of history, but we also support them because we have an own national security interest as European countries. If an alternation of borders by force in this century would be possible, Putin might not stop, but he might continue, and then you cannot achieve just and lasting peace in Europe. So anyone who thinks about stopping support for Ukraine is affecting the security interests of European NATO allies. We have to speak it out. And last but not least, what we see in Russia and the Russian behavior will not go away after the Russian invasion in Ukraine might have ended. Russia might most probably stay the same in its behavior. You cannot separate it from the theater in the Indo-Pacific. So when administration in DC, and I believe that's bipartisan, by the way, wants to have a tougher focus on North Korea, on China, you need to keep in mind it's linked. It cannot be separated from Russia's behavior. We see it in these days in Kursk. And that would be my attitude with which I would talk to the incoming administration in DC.
I understand, and please, I think that clearly there are a lot of people in this room that agree with you, and perhaps those arguments in the next administration will prevail, but perhaps not. And so I understand that you don't wish to talk about hypotheticals, but just between us. We're going to go, cameras down. Is there a contingency plan? Is there a backup plan? Does it exist? And if not, ought it not to?
So we have to make clear this is not 2016. We are much better prepared than 2016 when speaking about contingency plans, meaning that we have made clear we will have a constructive approach to the new administration. And for sure, we as Europeans are willing to do more, and that means to invest more, to spend more on our own security in a holistic understanding, be it on military issues, as well as in a broader view on security. And this is not 2016 also looking to my own country. Our defense spending now is above 2%. We have stopped our dependency from Russian fossil fuels. Nord Stream is history, and we have taken a tougher chance on China too, also with respect to our 5G grid.
Thank you. Let me ask you, Laurent, same question. If the United States government no longer, sanctions relief could be on the table. We don't know what the pre-negotiations are. Minister, do you know what the pre-negotiations are? No? No comment. Okay. We'll talk later. But Laurent, if those sanctions get loosened as part of some sort of ceasefire deal, if the support for the financing that comes from the U.S. government goes poof, what are the implications of that? And what can, again, the people in this room do or tell their respective governments and populations needs to be done to mitigate for that and to plan for that, rather than ignore it and then be surprised by it if it does come to pass?
Well, I'm going to try to stick to energy. Obviously,
Sure.
the money coming for military, the money coming for direct support for the Ukrainian budget, and then some of the emergency things that Nancy was talking about, that has to be state funded. In terms of the energy sector, which could happen now and also in the future, I'm going to go back to this political risk insurance. That's not a cost. I mean, you charge for political risk insurance, you charge a premium that you expect will keep you whole. That's what insurance does, that's what insurance is. So there must be a way for mechanisms to be put in place so that private sector money, because it's going to be private sector money. There's not enough, to rebuild the Ukrainian power sector, which has to start now, has to do all the hardening that Nancy was talking about. It's going to be private sector money, and it can be facilitated by Europe on its own, without direct budgetary cost if they do the right thing and come up with clever ways to back it through political risk insurance.
Interesting. And then Nancy, from the business perspective, what are some ideas for not just to mitigate against the chance that the United States might pull back, but to make all of these plans that we've just spent all this time talking about faster, better, and enable private sector to do the things that Laurent is suggesting that they ought to be doing?
Where there's a will, there's a way. And I believe that, first of all, we can't. I so strongly agree with Tobias on we cannot let Russia win this in any way, shape, or form, or let them think that they won this. We must see victory in Ukraine, and they must be afraid of all of us once and for all. I know it won't be once and for all, but what happens with a new world order under a new administration is anybody's guess, but I can't help but believe, and unfortunately the CDS has left and the Minister of Defense, but we have, the majority of our Canadian troops are sitting in Poland doing training-ready exercises, as are all of our allies in NATO, in Poland right next door, Germany, and I can't imagine us letting this get out of control. I really can't. So then back to how we rebuild. This Kyiv School of Economics estimates just the power grid alone has sustained about $16 billion of direct asset damage. Oh. And another $40 billion of economic impact as a result. And that means that there's tremendous opportunity for growth and new equipment, new assets, new technologies, new jobs. And that actually gives people hope. It gives business hope. I hope it gives Ukraine hope that this is once this is over, and it must be over, there's a tremendous opportunity for a brand new world, a better world. And business will find a way, governments will find a way to support that. Insurance is definitely something in the meantime that's going to be necessary. But I have no doubt that the investment, foreign and local European investment, is going to be there willing and able to respond.
Excellent. A note of optimism, very much appreciated. We're going to go to questions in just a second. Start thinking about them. But first, one last question for you, Laurent. I read in the Wall Street Journal, take that with a grain of salt, but that there's a Miami financier named Steve Lynch who wants to purchase the broken Nord Stream pipeline. And what do we make of that? Good idea, bad idea? How's that going to work?
Well, so this is what happens when very smart people come up with business ideas based on geopolitical concepts without sort of having advisors that tell them a lot of details on the ground.
That's the world. That's Washington. Yeah.
So let's
that's
pretend.
yeah.
Let's pretend that, and I'm
That's
sure
the New World Order.
Tobias Lindner can say this isn't going to happen, but let's pretend that there's peace and that Germany is happy to buy Russian gas again, and then you can use this one of the 4 strings of Nord Stream, one of the Nord Stream 2 strings that's not been destroyed, and use that. Uniper, German company, has won a 13 billion euro arbitration case against Gazprom. When Gazprom turned off the gas in 2022, 15 to 20 European companies sustained huge losses. All of them have filed arbitration cases against Gazprom. All of them will win. Uniper won 13 billion euros. That was the first. OMV won 200 something million euros. Let's say you build that pipeline.
Never to be collected.
Never to be collected. But if gas were to magically start flowing from Gazprom to Germany, okay,
It would be
the
deducted
first
from that.
3 years, based on a reasonable low price and the capacity of that pipeline, the first 3 years would be free gas being delivered just to pay off these settlements. That's with a sort of cautious assumption about how much the ultimate cases against Gazprom will lead to. So take any project and take the first 3 years of revenue and take it out and say, Gazprom, you're not going to get any money for a long time. By the way, if gas magically continues to flow, it's going to flow across Ukraine. It's not going to flow through this pipeline. It'll flow across Ukraine so that Ukraine will get part of that revenue. I don't think it's going to happen. In our base case scenario, we don't have Russian pipeline gas ever returning at previous volumes to Europe. So I think this particular idea, not a good one.
Got it. Mr. Minister, do you have an opinion on Miami financing?
You know, it's not my job to give advice on business ideas. What I can say is, there is no demand for Russian gas anymore in my country. So if this person, I only read it in the news, wants to dig out the pipeline and use the material for something else, okay, let's do it. But I'm not a business advisor. So
Fair enough. All right. We'll go to questions. Can I just say, please tell us who you are, what your affiliation is, and if you please stand up when you ask the question. And if you want to make a speech, please put it in the form of a question. And let's start right there in the back.
Hello everyone, my name is Sofia, I'm from Ukraine, and I'm a winner at 15 at 15 Youth Build Democracy competition. And today my question... And today my question is, in what ways can renewable energy technologies such as solar and wind power be integrated into Ukraine's energy grid to ensure long-term sustainability and security? And also, maybe will there be such integration at all, and how soon it will be appear?
Excellent question. Who wants to take that? Nancy?
Well, I'll start. I think I missed the last part of the question.
How soon will it take?
Oh, how soon will it? Well, there needs to be a sense of stability. You don't want to build something that the Russians are going to attack right away. So renewable energy with battery backup storage, the pumped hydro storage is something that can be built rather quickly. But we have to make sure that it's done so that you have reliability. And you don't want to have intermittency that the wind and the solar does commit. So you need significant storage on the renewable side. I do think that there will be new modern technologies. I do think that the carbon capture side of gas-fired generation will come into effect. It's not affordable right now. But, and then I really do believe in the waste generation using methane from garbage and agricultural animal waste is a really simple, easy, affordable way to get power into distributed pockets of the country today.
Excellent.
And if I could just add,
Sure.
You don't have to be a member of the Green Party like Tobias Lindner to want solar and wind to be part of the solution. It's cheap. Obviously, you have to manage the grid issues, but solar, wind, battery storage, they're not technologies of the future. They're commercial technologies today, and just on the pure basis of cost, they're going to be a big part of the solution.
Excellent, thank you. Down here in the front row.
The thing is, it's cold. When it's really cold, you don't have, in the wintertime, there's not a lot of sun and not a lot of wind when it's really cold. So you do need a lot of storage.
Yeah.
Right, right. Thank you.
So Espen Barth Eide, I'm the Norwegian Foreign Minister, and it builds on Sophia's good question, actually. Norway is now the #1 energy provider to Europe after Russia was cut out. And for that reason, we've also taken a deep interest in the energy repairs, but also energy transition of Ukraine. And it was well said here that, you know, and kudos to the conference for having a panel on grids, because it is so instrumental both to energy security here and now, but also to energy transition. There is actually no transition without transmission. And we speak a lot about energy sources, but to have a stable, safe, secure transmission network is very important. My question is, there were a lot of good things said, but not so much about the connections to Europe, because I think a key element of saving Ukraine's energy is to connect it to the European grids, two-way street, both ways, and and the very radical transformation away from fossils, which is happening in Europe and which has been accelerated by the war because of the fallout of Russian exports, should also be part of the solution for Ukraine. So that's my challenge to the panel.
There are grid connections, as you will be aware. It's a very good point. There are grid connections with Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania. Those are operating. I think it's about 2 gigawatts capacity, which is sort of peak load in Ukraine now is maybe 16 gigawatts capacity. So it is playing a significant role today. And then long run, in the near term, that's electricity flowing generally to Ukraine. But in the long run, I think Ukraine will be an electricity supplier to Europe because of the investment that will come in. And Ukraine does have this baseload nuclear that is there and will remain.
So just one comment. First of all, I agree. Second, as you know, we have already the first connections off the grid, but especially in my country, for example, we have to invest in our grids anyhow, because renewing and adapting the grid to renewables, that's necessary anyhow. So let's use this transformation and the investment into grids also for the connectivity with Ukraine. And by the way, same is true when looking into gas. You know that we have invested into LNG terminals, for instance, so that we on the short and mid run are able to substitute what came from Russia in the past. But we do the investments in a way that we can use them later on for green hydrogen. And I believe that's the right attitude, investing now, not in the status quo or status quo ante, but into the future.
And the LNG picture in the United States might actually improve under the next administration. Is that right?
It might improve, but you see that transformation goes hand in hand. It means we also our demand for gas decreased. The industry adapted to the price signals, adapted to the new situation. So there will be a need over the next years for LNG, and in the future, the heavy industry, they need green hydrogen because it's simply physics. I keep it with that.
I read that hydrogen is the energy source of the future, and it always will be.
I doubt.
But I don't think we should get stuck on the colors of the rainbow for hydrogen.
Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that in the coffee hour. I want to get to at least 1 or 2 more questions. Ma'am, right here.
Hello, I'm Nicole Petrucci. I'm a colonel in the Space Force. Apparently, I have the throat thing too, but I'm not sitting in that chair. I do want to get back a little bit to, we talked about renewable energy, and you also talked about how cheap some of these technologies are, but how do we prevent them from, because what we've seen as renewable energy technology is rolling out, what we've seen is those places with an increase in poverty, or they have unemployment, or they have a lot of pollution exposure, those actually don't get those renewable energy technologies rolled out to them. So how do we create not a bigger inequality in this as those vulnerable communities are there?
Great question.
I I was at an event in Africa a couple weeks ago in Namibia, and there was a lot of discussion along these lines. What is happening is that solar PV, rooftop solar PV, is so affordable now that without government support, it's just happening. In South Africa, it's happening in Nigeria. That's not a grid that's on your roof, but that contributes to energy security, and it's affordable. I don't like when I hear energy. So the biggest problem in the poorest countries of the world is that they're burning traditional fuels, cooking fuels in their home, which is horrible for health as well. The solution there is not renewables. The solution there is LPG, propane, that sort of thing. And the fact that that produces CO2, I think, is irrelevant.
Yes.
Yeah, I just go back to the transmission comment, sorry. I agree, transition isn't without transmission. But I really do think that we need to carefully consider strategically how interdependent we are if energy is going to be used as a weapon. I think that we have to, we have to at least have backup. And so if your main transmission line from that great wind farm, excuse me, the cable's cut, what do we do as a backup? We've seen the communication lines cut, purposely, presumably. And so how do we prepare ourselves to have isolated generation that will provide backup power for our countries? And I think that's going to be critical in the future. Europe may be the best way to start that as a concentric approach. And I do think that the rooftop solar, there's an incredible new technology that is being produced in Poland that is it's a solar tape, basically. A company called Sol that we had a look at. The Ukraine government is taking an investment position in that, and you just apply it to roofs. You can see through it, you can put it on windows, and it actually generates electricity. So it's going to be interesting to see rooftop solar and the conversion of these new technologies that will be really important in the future.
Excellent. Minister, any closing words?
I believe we have to invest in resilience and backup solutions for our energy grids anyhow, regardless of the source. When we see, for instance, in Ukraine, and you mentioned there the large share of nuclear power, when we see the Zaporizhzhia plant and how dangerous it is that Russia is violating its international obligations in handling that plant, it's always about the grid. It's always about resilience, regardless where the energy might come from. And to have a decentralized approach, for sure, it's also an investment into security and resilience. Yeah. I'll stop here.
So we're out of time. I do think we've made a lot of progress in defining the challenge. Now the task is up to all of you to go back and define the solutions. And always remember, what happens in Halifax does not stay in Halifax. And I look forward to seeing you all again here next year. And please give our panel a round of applause.
Thanks, Josh.
Please join us for a coffee break in the foyer. please make your way back to the auditorium for our next session. Thank you. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. The program will begin now.
Good morning, everybody. The program is beginning, and we're starting this session a little differently. Last year, to mark our 15th anniversary, we launched a contest, an international contest, called 15 at 15 Youth Building Democracy. It's a global contest where young people, Vladimir, they have to be 15 years old, make a video that is 15 seconds long about one positive change they want to see in the world 15 years from now. And these are their videos.
We have another question.
Will China help Iran in backing Hamas? Artificial intelligence can be dangerous.
We grew up hearing about food insecurity.
in the world every day with my own eyes, I don't want to stop and continue dreaming. I dream of creation, not destruction, of uniting, working together, because only together we can create a future in which every person feels safe and can realize their potential.
Many countries are facing population aging. Young people struggle with high living costs and more senior people are in need of support and care. In 15 years, I hope the world will be happier because the youth will live with the elderly and they can take care of each other.
Hey, 15, how do you feel about the world right now?
Tired.
Tired. Tired of the political games, tired of the endless misinformation. As our world continues to evolve, we need to stay informed and put an end to the lies. We deserve the truth.
Hello everyone, my name is Sophia, and the positive change I would like to see in the world in the next 15 years is the revival of ecology and living conditions for people in war-torn territories around the world and in my home country, Ukraine.
Next 15 years, education must shift from memorizing facts to mastering critical thinking and problem solving. This is how we can create a generation ready to tackle global challenges, drive innovation, and secure a better and brighter future for all.
Largest cities in the world, and it is running out of water.
Over 4 billion of the world's population suffer from water scarcity.
In the next 15 years, I would like to see water saved, shared, and sustainable for all.
Our winners are here with us, and I'll ask them to stand, and then we can give them another round of applause. Bennett from Little Rock, Arkansas, here he is. Tavia from Jamaica. Katerina and Sophia from Ukraine, and Yiting from Taiwan. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. This is the future. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the closing plenary of this year's Halifax International Security Forum. My name is Michael Serapio. I'm the host of the Cable Public Affairs channel, which I say because it's CPAC, and I don't want our American friends to be confused. So thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for being a part of the discussion that we're going to have here that will very much involve you. And you know, none of us saw the video before we came up here, although it really sets the tone incredibly well, because we're talking about an era of optimism. It's up to you. But obviously, as we come together, the world is facing its own challenges of strife. And in recent history, as seen in that video, even in times of trouble and division, great optimism can evolve and be seen. And to that video, to those who put it together, thank you, because it does set up the discussion very well for us this afternoon. Now, I do want to begin our discussion in a moment, but I want to walk through a little bit of the process, because this is the closing plenary. I also want to give as much time as possible to those who are gathered here to perhaps make a small statement if you want, but really focus questions to the panel that addresses the issue at hand. And to do that, we do have, as in all plenary sessions, have roving microphones. And if you want to, there will be a moment where I will ask you to raise your hand. A microphone will come to you, identify yourself as well as whom you are with, and then you can feel free to ask your question. And as I say that, that's going to happen about halfway through this conversation, but I do want to introduce our panelists right now. Immediately to my right, Dr. Vjosa Osmani Sadriou is the president of Kosovo. Ms. Sabrina Sakib is the former member of parliament in Afghanistan. Evgenia Karamurza is the director of advocacy at the Free Russia Foundation. And Michelle Flournoy is the co-founder and managing partner of West Exec Advisors. Thank you to the four of you for taking part in today. And I really want to begin our discussion by reflecting a little bit as to how this weekend began. And to that, I'm going to lean in on Peter von Praag, of course, the president of the Halifax International Security Forum, because when we first gathered, he reminded everybody here that victory in Ukraine must be assured. Ukraine, the war, it must be won, because all of the security challenges that face the world right now in Europe, the Americas, the Middle East, Taiwan, Asia, all are tied to victory in Ukraine. And that's because victory in Ukraine will send a message to the countries that are seeking to destabilize the world's democracies, in particular China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Now, second, he reminds us, and I'm going to read directly to his opening speech. He said, quote, "Ukraine has the cause, courage, and commitment to win this war. The United States and its democratic allies must stand together with Ukraine until its victory that will, in turn, give birth to an era of peace and prosperity and new optimism in the world's democratic future." So again, despite the strife, it will, if there is victory in Ukraine, hopefully lead to optimism. But the four of you do come to this gathering from very different perspectives. So I want to begin with the premise that winning the war in Ukraine is important and what that means for you. Madam President, I'll ask you to begin us.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start by saying that I agree with what you just read. Representing a country that was built from the ashes, a war-torn society that today is the strongest democracy in the region, a rule of law champion, and a country that offers a helping hand for those in need. Because when we had our need, the world's democracies did not turn a blind eye on our suffering, but came to our rescue. We believe strongly that winning the war in Ukraine is going to determine the fate of all of us. Not just because it is so obvious that Putin wants to expand the conflict, not just because it would not only end with Ukraine, because obviously they have territorial claims and they want to grasp territories of everyone around them, and they look at their neighbors as temporary countries, but because we should not let the bully win. But also because rewarding the aggressor with the victim's territory has never in the history of mankind led to long-lasting peace, never. We don't have one single case in recent history where rewarding the aggressor has made him, because it's always been a him with all due respect, has made him more peaceful or more prone to truly believing in peace. And at the same time, because it's going to encourage bullies around the world. It's not going to end with Europe only. And we've seen it in our region. Just to take an example, in early 90s, when Milosevic, the butcher of the Balkans, started the wars against Slovenia and Croatia earlier, people were saying, well, peace is impossible without Milosevic. He's the peacemaker, so they were negotiating with him. That led to the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then again, no one learned the lesson. They were like, well, he's the peacemaker. And that led to the war in Kosovo. More than 100,000 civilian victims were caused because of the appeasement of the aggressor. And many aggressors around the world were watching. And I think right now, so many aggressors around the world, so many dictators, just because they're a little bigger, just because they have more weapons, but most importantly, because they don't believe in democracy and our way of life. They don't believe in human rights and equality. They're all watching. It's going to destroy, I think, everything good and all the values and the foundations that we stand on that we've built after the Second World War. So for that, it's so much bigger than just Ukraine. And again, so much bigger than just Europe. Back in 1999, when NATO came to our rescue, what the President of the United States said that night was, first and foremost, he explained to the American people how close Kosovo is to Greece and to Italy. We're just like a few hours away. It meant that the war could expand in other countries in Europe. And a Europe that is not safe and secure means that there will be, of course, a much wider effect in global security. There can never be a safe and secure United States or Canada if there's no secure Europe. But finally, and most importantly, I think it's about values. And for me, this is not just rhetoric. I grew up as a child of 4 in a society that had never known peace in the history of the existence of our region. And as I discussed earlier when I met the Minister of Defense of Canada, for the very first time in hundreds and hundreds of years, our children are the very first generation in the history of our nation that have not known war. It's because those values of freedom and democracy and human rights were the ones that triumphed. So let's look at these success stories. The triumph of freedom and democracy does matter, because in a region in Europe, we're living in peace for the very first time in the history of our existence. So your work does matter. Not giving up does matter, no matter how hard and no matter how long it takes. It does matter to stand for these values and not giving up for those that have always, because if we look at the history of Russia, with perhaps a few exceptions from time to time, it does matter to stand up to that kind of mindset. And after all, this entire battle between democracy and autocracies is a battle of 2 different mindsets. One that believes that the people are the centerpiece, human rights are the centerpiece, and democracy is our way of living through which we defend these values, is the centerpiece, versus autocracies where it's about him, it's about the men, it's about grasping others' territories, it's about never caring for the rights of the people. And if this is not a fight worth fighting, then I really don't know what else is.
Sabrina, how would you answer that question as to what resonates when you hear that every international challenge right now is tied to victory in Ukraine?
Well, I cannot agree more on what had been said by Peter and also in this panel by you. Coming from a country that have the worst case of failure of the world, and we have tasted it, and we have suffered a lot, and there is no worse example than Afghanistan. So we, as Afghans, would like to see the world win in Ukraine, more than anybody else to correct the failures, to get together, to make sure that we stand strong against inequality, dictatorship, but also extremism and terrorism that we are paying the price for now. And as if you remember, for many years, for the past 20 years in Afghanistan, there had been a lot of time that we were concerned that the war on terror will be on hold in Afghanistan because Iraq is the priority now, because Syria, because Yemen. The world cannot handle all the conflicts, at one time. So I know that, and I understand that it was very costly, not in terms of money only, but also blood and sacrifice that the world has made, also Afghans. But just because there is a lot happening in the world. So, and because that war on terror in Afghanistan was taking a bit longer, people were impatient and could not continue it, so they stopped it. For you, it was the battle on terror or fighting terrorism. For us, was the battle for life. And we are still sacrificing every moment in Afghanistan, and women of Afghanistan and children of Afghanistan are paying the price more than anybody else. Coming back to the Ukraine case, China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia are involved in the battle in Ukraine. 3 of them are our immediate neighbors, and they are present in Afghanistan. They are investing in Afghanistan, not only in the financial sector and economy, but also military-wise. You are aware that schools are shut down. Madrasas are being opened there. So they are brainwashing our kids, our boys. A new generation of terrorism will arise from that country that can threaten the global security. If that can be put on hold, we wish Ukraine and the world a victory as soon as possible, and we do everything we can to see that happens, so that more global challenges that we feel that can threaten the whole globe, not only us as Afghans, be addressed while it's not too late. So just remember, except North Korea, all 3 other CRINCS members are actively present in Afghanistan and have diplomatic relations with the Taliban.
Evgenia, what would you say to the question?
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Peter van Praag and to Halifax International Security Forum for creating this amazing platform where we can all come together and talk about these very important issues, and where we can meet freedom fighters from all over the world and feel their strength and feel their optimism that pushes them to continue their fight despite everything. As to the question, I come from the country whose government has unleashed the biggest, the bloodiest war of aggression since World War II. To me, there is no question about whether Ukraine should win or not. And to me, this is very, very personal. This is very personal because this regime has been on the scene for 25 years. And because the war, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, is the result of impunity that Vladimir Putin has enjoyed for 25 years, for a quarter of a century, while committing very similar crimes against our other neighbors and against the Russian people. There was the invasion of Georgia in 2008. There was the annexation of Crimea. There was the testing of Russian military might in Syria on civilian population. There was the second war in Chechnya, and there were violence quashing of peaceful protests in Russia. The world was watching and expressing concern and continuing doing business with Vladimir Putin. And so, when you look at it from Vladimir Putin's point of view, if he's allowed to annex 25% of Georgia or Crimea, why not the entire Ukraine? If he's allowed to commit war crimes in Chechnya and in Syria, why not in Ukraine? Logical, terribly, horribly logical. A bully, I completely agree with Madam President, a bully needs to be stopped. Bullies do not understand a civil conversation. You know, I understand that the world, the democratic world, comes from the premise that we need to be able to talk to each other in a civilized manner. This is how the United Nations was formed after the Second World War. So that, you know, it's like with the kids, don't hit, use your words. But the problem is, dictators don't understand that. They don't understand a civilized conversation. They don't understand compromises. To them, compromises are weaknesses of their opponents, and they're going to continue pushing for as long as they're allowed to continue in this manner. A bully has to be stopped. And this is very personal to me. You know, in August of this year, there was this amazing blessing for my family, because my husband sitting here yet again survived for the third time. He survived 2 assassination attacks in the past and 2.5 years in Putin's gulag, and he spent 11 months in solitary confinement in atrocious conditions. He survived and returned home. My family was lucky. My family was blessed yet again, but many weren't. And in early September, there was this family in Ukraine, the Basilevich family in Lviv. The father, mother, and 3 beautiful daughters. Mother her name was Evgenia, just like mine. And she was 43 years old, just like me. And together with her husband, they had 3 beautiful kids, just like Vladimir and I. And the pictures of the father standing over the graves of his beautiful wife and their 3 beautiful daughters will haunt me forever. This is why Ukraine has to win. This is why this bully has to be stopped, because Vladimir Putin will only bring misery and pain and destruction. He's carrying out 2 wars now at the same time. One is a war of aggression against Ukraine, and another one is a war against the Russian population, against Russia's future. If he's allowed to continue in this manner, we will see even more aggression and even more misery and even more pain and blood everywhere he goes. He needs to be stopped.
Michelle.
Well, it's hard to add. I agree with everything that's been said. You know, I would just say, of course it's true that the people of Ukraine, in their own right, deserve our support, given that they have experienced a unlawful, brutal, horrific war of aggression against them as a sovereign democracy. And on that basis alone, we should be sticking with them like glue, not leaving them to fend for themselves. But there are broader implications. Absolutely true that if the dream of Europe whole, free and at peace, that we actually achieved for a period of time after the Cold War ended, and after the wars in the Balkans, you know, if we really believe that is not, it's fundamentally in our interests, but it's also a representation of our values, we have to fight for that. We have to make sure that Vladimir Putin cannot take that away from us, because I agree with you. If there's any semblance of a win in this, whether it's a negotiated outcome or whatever, anything that allows him to walk away with a win, this will be one of the first chapters. There's already been several others, but he won't stop. We're going to see him back in Ukraine in the future. Once he reconstitutes, we'll see him possibly in Moldova, in Georgia again, wherever it's going to be, he will not stop. But beyond Europe, there's also implications. Who else is watching this closely, like a hawk? Xi Jinping. He already promulgates a narrative in China, beyond China, around the world, that democracy is in decline. Democracies are feckless. Democracies don't have staying power. They, talk a good game, but if we persist, we wait them out, their coalitions fall apart. Look at what happened in Afghanistan, he says. Look at how divided we are, in our own internal politics at times. But so this is a signal that he will receive as well. It will impact our ability to effectively deter a war with China in the future, or aggression against Taiwan in the future. And if that war starts, that will be World War III. That will be a war that sends the global economy into recession. TSMC, the chip maker in Taiwan, you shut down their ability to export chips all over the world, 90% of the chips, the world's advanced chip supply, $2 trillion of damage to the global economy, even over and above the fact that we should not allow aggression to decide the fate of the Taiwanese people. So this has huge implications. It has huge implications for the credibility of the United States and its Western allies. It has huge implications for whether we still have a rules-based international order, or whether we're now living in a might makes right world. So I think the stakes are enormously high.
Thank you. Now, we are approaching the halfway mark, believe it or not, already of our conversation. So I'm going to invite everyone who's thinking of asking a question, have one to put your, we have one question over there, if we can get a microphone.
So my name is Katerina. I'm 15 at 15 winner, and I have a question. I am from Ukraine, and I'm living in Ukraine now. The front line is just 30 kilometers away, and my country fights for its independence every single day. My mother is a military, and she can't be with me here. You speak of area of optimism, but in my reality, with the war so close, it feels almost impossible to find any optimism. What would you advise to a teenager like me living in such circumstances? How can I face in the future and figure out what to do next? Thank you.
Does anybody like to?
I was your age at the end of the war in Kosovo. We were kicked out of our house, which was, of course, burned down. We were hiding in the mountains from shelling and the massacres of the Serbian forces. And we had this little tiny radio with a battery where we were trying to listen while leaders were gathering around the United Nations and deciding about our fate. And it was hard to be optimistic when we saw people dying around us, women giving birth to babies that would die immediately because there was nothing to feed them on, because the mothers had not eaten for many weeks. Families being massacred, so many still missing from the war, even 25 years after. And just, having seen so many wars before. But the world came to our rescue. And I think the unanimity that democracies around the world are showing, the unity that they are showing when it comes to Ukraine, is a great signal of optimism. And I know there are a few voices here and there within NATO and the EU that they might, think a little differently. But the fact, I haven't seen the world gathering so strongly in defense of anyone as they have when it comes to defense of the people of Ukraine and the values that Ukraine is defending. And I know it takes time, and it's really hard for people that are suffering a war to wait and to ask them for patience. But you will win, because there is nothing that can stand on a way of the people who want to be free. Nothing. So you will win. And the fact that freedom has always won should keep you optimistic. And of course, my final point, it's the people of Ukraine that will finally win. Because after all, yes, it's important that everyone is helping. But what really counts is the resilience of the people. And I have that same hope for the people of Afghanistan. We were under occupation for hundreds of years, not just for a few years, for hundreds of years. Yet we never lost our identity, and we never lost our resilience to fight for our freedom. So stay strong, because nothing will stand on the will of the Ukrainian people to be free.
May I add a point to that?
Yes, actually, if we can get the microphone to there. And actually,
Sure.
I did want to ask you, because you're visibly moved by that answer.
Yes, I am. You know, the topic of this session today, this plenary, made me think a lot. For the past 3 years, many of you have heard me complaining about the situation of human rights, women's rights in Afghanistan, which is severe, and it should be concerning, not only to us, but the whole world. But it made me think and come up with a lot of signals and signs of optimism, of movement, of resilience within Afghanistan and also outside Afghanistan. And that could be a very good example for you. Girls are not allowed to go to school beyond grade 6. There is a lot of underground, private schools, online schools. Girls are trying to find books and read by themselves, connect to the outside world, use social media, you know, echo their voice outside, keep their connection alive. The technology helped a lot, obviously. Both us and the Taliban, they are using it. We use Clubhouse, and they do so. We use Twitter Space, they do so. But that helped the women of Afghanistan who are locked down as it's an open prison for us. And even in the families, the house is a prison itself. Men in the houses are scared to be punished because of the freedom that women are fighting for. So the families are pressurizing their girls and their women inside the house as well. But women did not give up. Women are still taking risks to go to the streets. This didn't happen in the first time Taliban took over Afghanistan. You have seen the videos. But nowadays you see women movements, women fighters on the streets demonstrating, risking their life. They know that it's very costly, not only for themselves, but even for their families. And also outside, we have not waited quiet. We knocked every door we know. We bothered so many of our friends so many times. As an example, for the past 3 years, all those countries that have hosted Afghans and resettled them have become aware of what is going on. That's why they stood by our side. The Canadian Parliament opened its door for the former members of Parliament of Afghanistan. It's become a hub for activism of Afghan groups inside Canada. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, along with Australia, Netherlands, Germany, in the United Nations, they have announced that they will file a complaint against Taliban with the ICG to take them to the court and keep them accountable. We complain about our situation, but we also keep our resilience, our strength, not only socially, but also culturally. Today I have a beautiful necklace. It's a handmade necklace from Afghanistan. I want to show the beauty of my country to the world. It's not that every woman or every family in Afghanistan are oppressive and they don't deserve democracy. It's not like that. So keep your resilience alive. Do whatever you can. I remember on 19 August 2024, a few months ago, I have attended a program to against the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. And I said, I have a responsibility to be here. It's happening in my time, the injustice. So if I don't show up, if I don't stand there, you know, if I take my luxury at home and, you know, do whatever I can, I owe it to my people, to my nation, to my generation. So I wish you all the best, but I'm sure you'll survive. The whole world, we, the women, are with you, and we can do whatever we could to support your voice, to echo your voice, as we call for you to do for us. We are all one, and we are all suffering from one challenge, one issue in this world, and that's injustice.
If we can get a microphone over to this side of the room, please. There's a question from the floor. Oh, and I'm sorry, if you could say your name and identify yourself, please.
Yes, hello. I'm Mauricio Mechulam from the Mexico Research Center for Peace. I would just like to, in order to keep the optimism, what would you recommend for actions to deal with the incoming administration in the U.S. so that we can actually match what this panel is striving for, and not everybody in this room is striving for, and actually reach for a practical, pragmatic solution?
Dare I ask the American?
Yes. Well, one person's opinion, but I think President-elect Trump has made it clear that he wants to seek an end to the war, negotiate a deal. I think the first, the folks who have an opportunity to speak with him, whether those are the advisors he's appointing around him, members of Congress, others, I think he needs to be helped to understand these larger stakes in Ukraine, number one. I think he needs to understand that getting a deal fast is not the right objective. Sort of seeing a just outcome in Ukraine is the right outcome, and that history will judge him very badly if he gets a bad outcome fast. And that his fellow, the strong men around him, like Vladimir Putin, will see him as weak if he gets a bad outcome fast. I think we need to help him understand how much others are doing in support of Ukraine, the incredible support that Germany and all of our NATO friends are providing, that this is not something that has unfairly been a burden to the United States. We have just been doing our part. He needs to understand the extraordinary sacrifices and what the Ukrainian people have accomplished for their part. So I think it's really important to sort of meet him where he is, maybe in terms of his understanding, but try to elucidate some of these arguments for him, and particularly this ripple effect of how he will be viewed, how the loss of Ukraine could ripple into make it much more difficult for the United States to deter, alongside its allies, conflict and aggression in other, whether it's in Europe again or with regard to the Asia Pacific. So we need to make these connections in his mind to help him understand the stakes and to make sure that he pursues a just outcome as opposed to just a quick outcome.
Thank you. We have another question in the back of the room here.
Hi, I'm Iris from the United States. I've got a bit of it's a non-Ukraine question. And what I sense is a bit of a third rail topic here is around Israel and Gaza. I'm curious if the panel could provide some commentary, and admittedly this is primarily to you, Michelle, about where we are with optimism with that conflict, how our adversaries are thinking about that conflict. And as you talked about the balance between strategic interests and values and where we are in that balance.
Sorry, she asked it to you directly.
Okay, yes,
Thank you.
Okay, great. One point of optimism, I'm hearing that before this administration leaves office, there's a very good chance that a ceasefire in Lebanon will be completed. If not, then I think soon after the transition. I do think that President-elect Trump will also engage early on and with focus on the situation in the Middle East. I think he will try to leverage the greater trust relationship he has with Netanyahu. I actually think he'll try to push for an end to the war in Gaza and a ceasefire and a release of hostages. And he will likely offer up to Netanyahu his commitment to try to get normalization with Saudi Arabia, which was being negotiated when October 7th happened, get that back on track. Now, that's a complicated thing to pull off, But I do think what I'm hearing from people around President-elect Trump is that they will try to make this a priority. The huge challenge here is, will Netanyahu actually, go along with this? Does he understand that the tremendous civilian harm that's occurred in his prosecution of the war against Hamas, as justifiable as it might have started out as in terms of just cause responding to October 7th, trying to go after Hamas, but at this point in time, I think it's a mounting strategic loss for Israel in terms of its moral standing, in terms of its international support. This is why you have, as you know, million plus Israelis on the street on a regular basis protesting for an end to the war. You have former national security professionals in Israel pushing for an end to the war, and so forth. So whether Trump's relationship with Bibi will make a difference in persuading him, okay, the time has come, remains to be seen. Whether the key sticking point is, what is the future of the Palestinian people? And because the Saudis, will not, they are concerned about how the Arab Street will receive this deal. They will not, I don't think, conclude this without a vision for a path to Palestinian sovereignty. The United States Senate, Democrats will have to vote if we're going to ratify the security agreement that is supposedly going to accompany this with Saudi Arabia. That's not going to happen unless there is a vision for a path to a viable future for both Israel, a secure Israel, and a some sort of sovereignty for the Palestinian people. So this is very complicated, but I do think this will be an area where the Trump administration tries to leverage its history with the Netanyahu, government to try to bring an end to the war.
I have two questions in the back of the room here, and they will be our final questions just because we're running out of time. But if we can begin in the row here and please identify yourself.
Thank you. Erica Bridge from the British Army. First of all, to the 15 at 15, congratulations. You give us optimism by what you have done, and you give us a future that I think we'll all be very proud of. So thank you. Could I ask the panel to take out a crystal ball? So you're looking at 15 years plus. That's quite a long way in advance. So if I can ask you to take out a crystal ball in 5 years' time, and I reckon in that 5 years' time, the colonels and captains over there will be a lot of generals and some admirals. So we're looking forward to seeing you in 5 years' time. But what do you see as signs of optimism that can be a positive reality in 5 years' time, please?
Does anybody want to begin?
I think the past couple of years, despite the many challenges from the COVID pandemic to the way how we combat climate change effects to security challenges that especially the European continent, but also the Middle East are facing, have at the same time proven that our foundations are very, very strong. It's like the pillars on which we stand are very, very strong. And that is a sign of optimism to deal with these challenges successfully in the next 5 years and beyond. Because unfortunately, I don't think everything will be resolved within the next 5 years. As we've seen, it's like conflict after conflict, problem after problem in different continents. But for us in Europe, of course, the one in Ukraine has affected us even more closely. Now, I do think that the unity that the Western worlds in general, but also other allies and partners who truly believe in democracy have shown in the past 2 to 3 years is a sign of optimism. And again, I know there are a few voices that sometimes show different opinions, but they are a few voices. The vast majority of democracies around the world want to stand resilient and strong in making sure that Ukraine wins. Secondly, as it was mentioned, when it comes to Afghanistan, we've been working a lot with leaders around the world. Kosovo is the very first country that answered to the United States request to receive Afghan evacuees, mostly women and children, of course. But I know that it looks like the attention is not there because of everything that is going on, but there is not a single multilateral meeting where we do not sit together and talk about how do we resolve the issue of this gender apartheid that is happening in Afghanistan. So there are a lot of efforts, and there are so many leaders around the world, mostly women, who do not forget about this and constantly work hard to make sure that we bring the world together to the rescue of basic human rights of women and children and families in Afghanistan based on the values of freedom and human rights. And thirdly, because I think no matter whether we're talking about Democrats or Republicans, my optimism is simply based on our personal story. It's such a success story. At the time when Russia's trying to convince the world that NATO is a failure, democracies are a failure, look at what happened in Afghanistan, my answer is look at what happened in Kosovo. The biggest success story of foreign and defense policy, a testament to what democracies can achieve when they stand together. How about we focus on the success stories as well? Yes, we do succeed. We have succeeded so many times in recent history only. So let's take these examples and make sure that we refuel ourselves with positive energy to fight for more successes and triumphs. So I definitely believe that seeing the unity among democracies when it comes to Ukraine, there is a lot of optimism ahead when it comes to Ukraine winning the war, and that will have a positive effect everywhere else around the world, including in China, when it comes to how China will be acting towards its neighbors and beyond. So I think we shouldn't, of course, be overly optimistic, carefully optimistic, and it will take a lot of hard work and also sacrifice. The price of freedom, unfortunately, is always too high. But again, it's without freedom and without democracy, we've seen the opposite of it. It's destruction and suffering, so we need to make sure that we continue to fight for it.
Evgenia?
Optimism doesn't come easily today, it's true. But I see the little signs of it everywhere, honestly. And yesterday I was sitting here in the audience watching the panel moderated by Vladimir Kara-Murza, and that panel included Leopoldo Lopez from Venezuela, Masih Alinejad from Iran, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya from Belarus, and Jeffrey Ngo from Hong Kong. We come from different places, we look differently, we speak different languages, but we bring you the same messages. The same messages, and these people who were sitting on that panel, they went through persecution, through prison, through assassination attacks. Masih is living under an assassination threat on a daily basis. And yet, they're unbroken. They're unbroken, and they stand tall, and they say these same messages. They send you these same messages strongly, forcefully, and they make you, well, they sort of, the strength that emanates from these people is incredible, and it's very contagious. Despite everything they go through, they stand tall, and they say, we will not be brought to our knees. We will not stop fighting back. We will fight back for as long as it's needed. But hear us, listen to us, look at us, recognize our struggle. And that struggle is becoming global. And that gives me optimism as well. Because, we see dictators coming together, propping each other, using each other's methods, perfecting these instruments of repression. And that is scary to watch. I was, when the election took place in Venezuela recently, and I saw that the Russian paramilitary group, Wagner, was sent there to squash protests. That made me scared, because I can see how they are helping each other in the practical sense. The attack on Israel on the 7th of October, I am sure, was a tactic to divert the attention from the war in Ukraine. So we see it happening, but we also see those fighting for democracy, those fighting for freedom, for the rule of law, and for human rights, also coming together and joining forces and becoming this global force of fighting back. This is one of the biggest reasons for optimism to me, as well as the resilience of my friends and colleagues who continue both inside of Russia and outside of the country, continue carrying out an incredible number of pro-democracy and anti-war initiatives. They face incredible challenges both inside and outside of the country, but again, their resilience and their refusal to give up despite everything gives me hope. They're there working on the ground, the lawyers, the journalists, the activists. They're thrown in prison very often. They're very often persecuted or thrown out of the country, and yet they refuse to stand down. This week alone, 239 people will be tried in Russia in politically motivated criminal cases, and that happens every single week. And these people give me hope because despite everything, they refuse to give up. And of course, the kids. I mean, we were watching these videos. This is our world's tomorrow, the literal future of our world. And they're there again, unbroken. They're there again, despite everything, you know, we know that we're not going to be able to leave them a perfect world. That's not going to happen no matter how hard we try. But they are they're growing up fighters themselves. They're growing up warriors, and that is a great thing to watch because we know that we can leave this world in their hands. These are the hands, these are very solid hands. They're going to take it to good places. This gives me hope. You know, Václav Havel said that hope is not the certainty that something will turn out right. It is the conviction that something makes sense regardless of how it will turn out. So these people from all over the world fighting for the same things, fighting for freedom and peace and human values, they do it not because they believe that they will succeed, but because they know that this is the right thing to do. When something bad happens, you need to stand up and you need to say, no, I'm not okay with this. You need to fight back when you're being attacked, when you're being harassed. You cannot stay silent. So, and I see so many people doing just that today, and that gives me incredible hope in the world's tomorrow. Yeah.
Now, I apologize. I know there's one more question on the floor. Unfortunately, we are quickly running out of time, so I invite you to ask it after the panel. But I do want to leave with a closing thought because this is the era of optimism, but the subclause of this, it's now up to you. So when you hear that, and I'm going to ask for short answers as we go down the row, what challenge do you put out there, not only for the participants in the room, but for democracies around the world and people who live in democracies around the world? What is the challenge if it is now up to them?
It's always been up to us. It's always up to visionary people, first of all, who truly believe in their freedom and they never give up. And secondly, it's been up to leaders who, no matter how hard, never gave up on the rights of their people. And I think the challenge is that way too many times, because democracies have a lot of procedures, it takes a lot of time until a decision is taken. And autocrats don't care about laws and regulations and procedures. They do things quickly. And secondly, because in democracy, debate, even when we differ, is important among autocrats because they join around their own interest. They don't care about these debates or listening to others. Time, I would say, is a challenge. It's just taking us a lot of time to get to important decisions. It took the world a lot of time to get to important decisions in the Balkans. It's taking the world quite some time to get to important decisions on Ukraine. I think we need to be quicker and more resilient and not allow fatigue to get around us. At the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I will end with this, many countries will say, yes, but what about the price of energy? People would get so tired, the price of the goods and so on. There's no price too high that we should be ready to pay for freedom. Because when you're not free, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. The price of energy and the price of food when you're not free. So we need to make sure that we put freedom to exist to begin with, which was denied to so many of us, as the centerpiece of our decision making. And then the rest comes along. When you fight for that resiliently, you will also have the good prices of energy and food and so on and so forth. So just focusing on what truly matters, I think, is a challenge, but a challenge that we will overcome.
Sabrina.
Would you mind if I go last?
Of course.
Thank you.
Of course. Evgen, yeah.
My one challenge to the global democratic community, I think, would be to have the courage to call a spade a spade. Have the courage to call a dictator a dictator. Have the courage to call for a change of regime change. Because that would be recognition that the only way for Russia to stop being a threat to everyone, including itself, is a democratic Russia. Is a peaceful and democratic Russia that will respect the rights of its own citizens and live in peace with its neighbors. Have the courage to say that out loud. Have the courage to support those forces that represent this Russia. And they're being annihilated today by the regime, because the regime, the Putin regime, wants you to believe that there is no alternative. The alternative is there, the potential is there, but the regime is doing everything to make sure that you don't see it and to make sure that it is completely destroyed. Have the courage to have a continuous dialogue with those people who represent that potential for a democratic Russia. Have the courage to call a bully a bully. Have the courage to call for regime changes in countries that represent threats to the entire world. Have the courage.
Michelle.
And I would add to that, have the confidence. If we sort of laid out all of the attributes and strengths of the Crinks, I love that, and then all of our attributes and strengths as the community of democracies, and everybody in the audience had to choose which hand of cards do you want to be able to play. I don't think anybody would choose the hand of the authoritarians. We have the best hand to play. The question is, it's our resilience, our democracies, our love of freedom, our respect for human rights, our economies, our innovation ecosystems, our human capital, our best education systems in the world. I mean, the best militaries in the world. You could go on and on and on. We have the best hand. This is a question of political will. And I understand that after 20 years and a very tragic outcome, in my view, in Afghanistan, that a lot of people are tired. A lot of people in the United States just want to turn away and forget about the world and focus on what they need at home. But I think, we as those of us who are Americans, and we ask our allies who can speak truthfully and candidly to us, to remind us that we have to have the confidence to believe in the difference we can make in the world and the force for good that the United States can be and must be, and our allies alongside us can be and must be. And we cannot give up that mantle of leadership as we try to make sure this world goes in the right direction.
Sabrina.
If you don't mind, I don't answer this question. I escape it because it was beautifully answered. Instead, I want to finish today's forum in a high mood and remind you that tomorrow is 25th November, the International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls. Please do whatever you can. When you go home today, think of it, do something, whatever, doesn't matter, even a tweet, to stand in solidarity with the women globally but more specifically with the women of Afghanistan and girls in Afghanistan, who even their voice are being banned to be heard in public, unimaginable. So I would like to go home listening to this song that I will try to sing for the first time in public in support of their voice. No matter how many restrictions they will put, we'll break the restrictions and we'll sing louder and louder. منم من زنم من جهانم کز آزادی و مهرخانم تو ای هم سنگر مهربانم به پاخیز ای هم جهانم اگر چکمه ها بر گلویم وگر مشت ها بر دهانم قسم بر خورشید قلبم در این وحشت هرگز نمانم اگر ساختن سد و دیوار وگر کاشتن چوبه دار من استاده و استوارم ز ظلمت هراسی ندارم منم من زنم من جهانم سرود سحر بر لبانم با خورشید آینده سوگند بر عهدی که بستم بمانم بر عهدی که بستم بمانم. Thank you.
Ladies,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all of our panelists over the weekend. I do want to take a moment to thank Stephen Markle, who is our filmmaker, who kept us engaged throughout the weekend. While everybody is standing, I want to thank the Honorable Minister of National Defense, Bill Blair. Thank you, Minister. I want to thank our partners, and I want to thank all of our participants who came from far and wide, from around the world, to be together. Now it's up to us. So let's choose victory. Have a safe trip home.
Please join us in the Atlantic Ballroom for our midday meal.